Okay.
The first time.
And the date that you entered, roughly?
October 15th, 1945.
What town?
In New Milford, Connecticut, my hometown. And I was drafted along with some of my friends who I went to school with. We went to Watertown, Connecticut. That was where we went through the normal physicals and everything, and then we boarded a train from there. We went to Fort Devens, Massachusetts, and we were there for about 2 weeks, where we did different tests and things to see what we were best suited for in the Army. And we hoped to stay together, but most of the fellows went to different things. I had a friend, Piggy Duncan, and he went into the Signal Corps. And I went to, after 2 weeks of up there, I went to Fort McClellan, Alabama. It took us 2 days to get there. We went down by troop train as far as Washington, D.C., and then from Washington down to Alabama, we had to give up our seats for the civilians to get on.
Now, prior to that, again, how many weeks were you in basic up there?
I was just 2 weeks up in, that was just to see where we were going to go,
Okay.
what we were basically trained, we're going to be trained
That's
for.
the location where you said,
Yeah,
welcome home. You're in the Army now?
yeah.
You obviously got rid of your civilian clothing.
Yeah, and we were given our uniforms and fatigues and dress uniforms, our boots.
Nice haircut?
Yes. Well, I already had, because I'd been in what they call the State Guard. It was just a volunteer things in our town.
Right.
And we had a retired lieutenant colonel from from the First World War, and he was a cavalryman, and it was called the Litchfield Light Horse. And so I had some training, and as far as marching and
Right.
whatnot. Then we went, like I say, we went to Anniston, Alabama, where Fort McClellan was, and we went there for infantry training for 17 weeks. And after that, well, I met a lot of different fellows there. Matter of fact, I met a fellow from my hometown after I'd been there for about 4 or 5 weeks, and he just came in and he joined a ranger outfit that he was being trained as a ranger. We were just being trained as regular infantry riflemen, and we had it was a good thing and it was a bad thing. When we went out on the different ranges and that people were told not to pick up any ammunition or duds or anything else like this. Now, we were the 17th week, and we were the 17th, each cycle was 17, and we were the 17th cycle, and we had 17 men killed. One time it was, well, the one time we were taken, they had towns set up there for us to go in and take, and they had targets, men in pits and stuff, and behind buildings, and they'd pull targets out, and you shoot at them. Well, I was a squad leader, and my BAR man pulled down on the target for this silhouette he thought came out behind a building, and he fired on it, and it was some fellow from another outfit got into our town somehow, but he killed the guy.
It's amazing. 17?
We had 17 deaths.
Most people never hear of those things.
Yeah, yeah. It was just, it was 17 deaths on the 17th cycle. And it was pretty, it hit all of us pretty hard because that was the first time we'd seen somebody get shot.
Now, 17 weeks is a considerable period of time.
Yep.
So you must have had very intensive training.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Marching and simulated combat.
Oh, yeah. You had, with transition, you crawled on your belly with machine gun fire and live ammunition right over your head.
Did you also use pistols or strictly rifles and machine guns?
We had infantry. We had the M1 rifles, and you had to, crawl through different areas and stuff like this. And there again, one fellow was. We had a lot of trouble with snakes and stuff in Alabama, and he thought he was crawling through the barbed wire underneath, and he thought he crawled into a coral snake. Instead, it happened to be a king snake, and he didn't realize it. They looked very much the same, and he raised his head up, and he got hit. They were only firing a foot above your head, and he raised his head up, and he got killed. And it was, you learned to because they were still expecting other things to happen, so we were taking infantry training for fighting. We had hand-to-hand, we had to learn jiu-jitsu at that time.
Were your companions mainly distributed from various states, or were they all from New England, or where?
Oh no, they were from all over. We had a lot of southern fellas. And
how about your officers?
Pardon?
How about your officers?
Officers were mixed. Our company commander was he'd just come back from Europe, and he'd been in infantry in Europe.
How would you rate him?
Very good.
Good.
He
Do you
was
remember
excellent.
his name?
I can't remember. Edwards, I think it was. I'm not sure. I can't remember. This is 60-odd years ago. But he was very, very fair-minded, very understanding. We had some Southern cadre that when we were doing calisthenics and stuff like this, we had this one Sergeant Cup, and he had a bad habit of when you were doing push-ups and stuff like this, and if you stuck your fanny up too high, he walked along and he had a stiletto, and he'd hold it over your fanny. If you come up too high, you got stuck in the fanny with it. And we took care of him one time.
How?
We met him downtown one time, and we had a little conversation. That after that, everything straightened out. And but most of them were pretty good guys.
Now, did you get some liberty in town?
Not for the first 8 weeks before we got off base.
All right. What was that like?
It was in Alabama. They don't like, especially in Anniston, they don't like soldiers. They had on the restaurant. There was a sign. I remember this one particular restaurant we were going in, and it said, "Dogs and soldiers not allowed."
Why was that?
They just, I guess they'd had too many problems with other, soldiers and stuff in town and stuff like that.
Misbehaving.
But they were very, it was a very, what do you call it, segregated. I mean, we went into a pool hall at this one time. It was matter of fact, it was on a Christmas Eve, first Christmas. It was the first Christmas we were there, and we were waiting for a pool table, and these fellows walked away and put their sticks, down on the table and walked away. So we figured they were finished, and there was a young black fella there, and I said, how about racking them up for us? And he racked them up, and we went to break, and these guys come walking back over, and they started yelling at the black kid, who told you to give our table away, and all this stuff. And before he could say anything, one of them picked up a stick and whacked him right across the head with it.
Wow.
Well, that didn't go over too good with the northern boys that were there, so we got into quite a squabble. And then we heard the sirens coming for the MP, so we grabbed the black kid because he was bleeding, and we went out through a back window. And most of us, I guess they had one or two guys that they caught, but after everything was settled down and everything, we explained what happened.
Now, was your leave 24 hours?
No, just day pass.
A day pass.
Yeah.
And that was it?
It was on a weekend, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And you just go for the day. That's all. There were no overnights.
Anybody go to a movie, anything like that?
Yeah, we went. We made that mistake too. Client went up in the balcony and said, manager come up and said, you boys have to go downstairs. This is for black people up here. Well, they didn't say black people. It was quite an eye-opener for somebody like me who came from a family. There was no prejudice in our family. My father and myself, when I was young, we lived in New York for a long time. We had a lot of black friends, so it didn't.
When you say New York, you mean the city, New York City?
Yeah, we lived in White Plains. We lived in Valhalla, Hawthorne, Thornwood, wherever there was work. It was back during the Depression. So I was born in New Milford, in Connecticut, in June 23rd, 1927. My father just bought a gentleman's farmer's. My father he came over during the First World War. He worked for the British government. He was a munitions and cannon inspector for the British government during the First World War.
So he came from England?
Came from Ireland. My father was Irish, yeah. Well, they came from England. He was already married. Matter of fact, 5 of my brothers and sisters were born in England. Matter of fact, my sister Mary was born right between two Zeppelin air raids in the First World War over in England. And they were supposed to come over on the Lusitania. And my sister Mary was just a baby. She was only maybe a couple of months old or something. I don't remember now. But she evidently didn't have the right shots. They wouldn't allow her to go on the ship without the right papers and stuff, so they took another boat, luckily. And that was when the Lusitania was sunk. And so that's why I'm here.
Interesting story.
Because my mother and the kids didn't get on that boat. My father was over here working in Bethlehem Steel at the time for the British government.
So what town were you born in then?
I was born in New Milford.
Okay.
But then the Depression, like I say, they had this gentleman's farm my father bought. And when the Depression came in '29, these people showed up from New York and said they owned this farm and wanted to know what we were doing on it and everything. And they come to find out, this fellow my father bought it from, back in those days there were no title searches or anything else. You wanted to buy the place, you bought the house, and my father paid cash for it. They were pretty well to do at that time. And I think it was only something like, $5,000 or $6,000 at that time. And it was just a matter of 3 or 4 acres, and it was just a small And so come to find out, the fellow that he bought it from never owned it. He was a caretaker for that farm.
Wow.
And another one that he had sold. I think the FBI is still looking for him. But back in those days, you know, you had to do what you had to do. So we moved from there back down to New York. And then I lived in New York until I was about 14. Yeah, about 14 we moved back up to Connecticut. We lived in several different places, but like I say, you had to go, and of course that, my father lost everything then. And we had to go wherever he could find the work. He was a gardener. He did big estates and stuff like this. He put gardens in, and he was excellent at it. Quite a, well, I guess you call it a landscaper.
Now let's jump back to Alabama. You said you're there for, I think, 16 weeks, right?
17 weeks.
17 weeks. Then what?
Then in February of '46, we finished up the end of February, and I came home on a 2-week leave. They gave us money to get a train ride home. And I was home for 2 weeks, then we went back. I had to go into Pickett, Virginia, Camp Pickett, in Blackstone, Virginia. And we waited around there for a while, and then we were shipped up to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. And we waited around there. We were waiting to go, and we kept on getting weekend passes and everything. We go into New York City and that. So finally this friend of mine, Ray Flynn, no relation, he was from Manchester, and I was from Milford. So we decided we used to write out the passes and that for the guys, and the sergeant would okay them, right? So we wrote out a pass. I wrote out a pass for him and a pass for myself, but then we made extra ones to New Milford and one to Manchester. And the sergeant didn't pay any attention, he just signed them. So we went to New York, and then we came home, and we got back down into Grand Central Station. We were up in the upper area there, and we were sitting there having a coffee, and these MPs come walking over, and they said, "You Flynn boys?" And I said, "Yeah." So he said, "We've been looking for you since about 5 o'clock this morning. We know that you went home. You weren't supposed to. Your outfit's shipping out." So they piled us in a weapons carrier, and we beat it back from Grand Central, drove all the way over to New Jersey, and the guys had packed everything up for us and everything, and all we had to do was go in and grab it and throw it in the back of the thing, and they took us down to the train, which was ready to pull out. They were waiting for us. The guys were still getting on the train when we got there. But that was a hairy. Of course, that 1 week we decided to go home, they decided to ship us out. So we were shipped out, I think it was on March 6th, and we...
1946.
Yeah, 1946. March 6th, 46, yeah. And then we landed in Le Havre, France, and we had to wait because we had a floating dock in there, and a British supply ship was on our dock. And so we were sitting out in Le Havre harbor. Everybody started going to the side of the ship. Everybody was all excited about something. We went over to see what it was, and evidently a German mine had popped up to the surface, and the French gunboat came out and blew it up and made quite a display. And so the next day, when we got up, we see the British ship laying on its side over on one side. They made him pull out and beach itself over. because it had no dock there, and they wanted to bring our troop ship in. We went over on the George Washington, which was a reprisal from Germany from the First World War, and they turned it in. It was a cargo ship, and they turned it into a troop ship for carrying us. It took us about 10 days or 8 days. I don't know. Let's see.
So you landed in Le Havre.
Yeah, from New York to Le Havre.
Now your first night there was on the ship or on that floating dock?
On the ship.
On the ship.
Yeah, the next morning we pulled into the dock. And
now, how long did you use the dock?
Well, we just until we started unloading. We pulled in at about 5 o'clock in the morning, and the little French kids were all running around down there on the docks and stuff, and the guys were all hollering to them and whatnot. I remember this. The guys were throwing. We had a lot of fruit and stuff, and the guys were throwing it down to the kids. And this full colonel came up on the dock and started hollering at us and to cut it out, and this, that, and the other thing. And somebody on the next deck up from where I was on the main deck. And the next deck up, somebody hollered down, what's wrong with that mess sergeant? And the other guy says, how do you know he's a mess sergeant? He said, can't you see the chicken on his shoulder?
That went over big.
Oh, yeah. So he just shook his head and walked away. So the guys kept on throwing the stuff to the kids. Then we got off and we took the Orient Express, we called it.
What is that?
But it was the 40 and 8s freight cars. It took either 8 horses or 40 men, and they called it the 40 and 8s. And we left there. We went through the outskirts of Paris and up into Belgium. They had
how many men were involved?
Oh, there was, I think, 1,500, something like that. No, not that many. No, 1,200. I think it was 1,200 because it was all of the black fellows were all on the lower decks, and we got into these freight cars and that. We were going across the through France and that, and they had to stop every so often because the engine was leaking water, and they'd stop and put more water in. Every time we stopped, the guys would get off and, do a little fraternization on the side. Well, it got so when we got going up in through Belgium, the towns got further away from where they stopped to get the water, and the engineer would blow the whistle twice, and you had to get back because when he blew it the third time, he was already gone. Well, I guess he saw some of the fellows were a little far off. I can't go into detail because it'd be discrimination. And those fellows went into the towns, which were, quite a distance from where we were. And by the time he blew the whistle the second time, he already had the train moving. And I think out of 500 and something of the blacks that were there, we ended up with 200 and something after we got off the train when we got to Marburg, Germany.
Wow.
So they were all over the place.
Now, how long was that trip?
I think it took us 2 days, 3 days.
Okay, then how were you fed? And how did you sleep? Sitting up?
We had K rations. You slept. They had straw in
You
there.
slept in your seat or what?
There were no seats. These are freight cars.
I mean, you're serious about that then?
Oh yeah, yeah. They had straw and stuff in there. You just lay down with your duffel bag and made the best of it. That's all. When you had to go, you just hung out the
Hung out the side.
hung out the door.
Okay.
Yeah, And we got, I think it was Marlborough, Germany we pulled into, and that's where they broke us up into different things,
Right.
and we had regular billets there, German Kaserns they were, German.
Now, was that a big operation?
Oh yeah, it was a depot for dispersion of troops throughout the American zone, and that's when I got assigned to the 1st Armored Division, and we went to. We were there for well, maybe a week. I can't remember now. It wasn't very long. And then we were shipped out to, went by truck from there to Berlingen, Germany, which is, I think it's northwest of Stuttgart, about 18 kilometers.
Now, you said armored. Now, were there many tanks involved? The war was over.
Yeah, we had light tanks.
All right.
We had light tanks. We had half tracks with 105s mounted on them. And but shortly after that, when we were in Berlingen, they took all the half tracks with the 105s and the light tanks. They sent them all back to the States, and we just had well, we had a few light tanks. They were dispersed through different outfits. And in this thing about the constabulary, you'll see that they had mounted horses for certain areas that they had to get to patrol and stuff like this.
And your duties at that time?
Well, at that time we were still the 1st Armored Division. And
I mean, your actual duties, though.
Well, we didn't have any actual duties right then because they were still getting the constabulary together. And that was in March, the end of March of 46. And by June of 46, we went from, well, what we did there, and we did patrol different things, like they had a bunch of freight cars were in Stuttgart, and they had buzz bomb juice, the alcohol that they used to send up their buzz bombs there, and somebody said it was snops and all this stuff, and we ended up having to go in and chase all these guys away from these trains. They were breaking into them. They were in big glass jugs. These guys were drinking the stuff. Some of them went blind from it. Some of them just about puked out their guts drinking the stuff.
Now, did you see any of that?
Oh yeah, well, we were the ones that had to go guard the trains. There was about 3 tank car or 3 freight cars with this stuff on it.
What did they ultimately do with the?
Pardon?
What did they ultimately do with the fuel?
I don't know. They shipped it out after a couple of days, and then we were on guard duty in Eschlingen, which is the other side of Stuttgart. It was an SS prison camp, and we pulled guard duty there on the SS.
Now, you had liberty, I assume, there, some
Pardon?
liberty. You had some liberty going into town.
Oh yeah, we went into
Elaborate on
Stuttgart.
that.
Yeah, they'd take us by truck into Stuttgart for. We could get passes.
How were you received by the populace?
Fine. Matter of fact, Ray Flynn and I used to stick together pretty much, and we found this German beer hall. It was upstairs. It was called Bill's Place, and you go in there and give them a pack of cigarettes, and they had American whiskey there, or Canadian Club. They give you a pint of Canadian Club, real good stuff. All sealed. I don't know where they were getting it from, but they were getting it. And
How about the food?
all the food was great.
I don't think so.
Yeah. And they, you know, for a pack of cigarettes, you could drink and eat all night long. And they had entertainment, you know. The show, what's it called? Trying to think of it. Well, anyway, they had this one comedian to come on. He did a dance and a song, and that he used to do Shuffle Off the Buffalo and sing it part German and part English and everything. And he was all made up and everything, you know. Just like they made a movie with, I can't think of her name. Have that senior moment.
I know. I'm thinking the same thing. She was a daughter.
Liza Minnelli.
That's right.
Played in it, and
I remember it.
I can't think of the name of it. Anyway, it was when I saw that movie later on in years, made me think of the Bill's Place with this guy with the entertaining and stuff.
Have any pictures from those days?
I haven't got any.
But you wish you did.
Yeah, I do. Well, I did have a lot of pictures just before we were. Well, that's later on anyway. But when we were ready to come home, I had a bunch of booty and a B5 bag. And
what's a B5 bag?
It's the folding bag. It's like the ones that you see on planes now, where guy there you can put a suit, lay a suit up and fold it over. Well, we called them B5 bags. And I had some diamonds. I had a Leica camera.
You had some diamonds.
Oh yeah.
You better elaborate on that one.
I bought them on the black market with cigarettes.
And
I didn't
diamonds?
smoke at the time, and we could buy a carton of cigarettes for, I forget now, I think they were 10 cents a pack or something like that. $1 bought you a carton of cigarettes.
So what ultimately happened to those diamonds?
Well, we were, Sergeant Daniels, he was in the 100, he joined us in the constabulary, just his points were good enough for him to go home. He was in the Battle of the Bulge in the 101st Airborne, and he and I had a lot of booty. And between the German caserns where we were, the buildings, there was a steam tunnel that went from the main place that produced the steam. We went down there and we hid our bags, because before you go home they come and pull an inspection on you. So somebody evidently had seen us go down the steam tunnel and put our bags down there. Of course, after the inspection was over, we went right down there and everything was gone. I had a Leica camera. I had a pair of tanker boots made out of camel hide. They were just as soft and beautiful, comfortable boots. I had them handmade right there in Booningen. And all these things just disappeared. And he was quite teed off about it too. But anyway, that's getting ahead of the story. From Berblingen, we went to Stuttgart to do things, and then from Berblingen we went to Boodingen. One is Berblingen, and the other one is Boodingen. You get a lot of that in Germany, and there when they changed us over from the 1st Armored to the 68th Constabulary, from the 68th Armored Field Artillery, and they changed us over to the Constabulary, and we started our patrols in certain areas. Each constabulary had a certain area to cover, and we'd check in with the burgomeisters of the different towns and everything to see if everything was all right or if he was having trouble with anything.
Did you ever encounter any trouble?
No, most of the time it was pretty safe. When we were first in Berblingen, and we went out on a few patrols or different things around there. We had trouble with the Hitler Younger. They would set up like piano wire. If you went through it under a road or a tunnel or something like that, come out the other side, there'd be a piano wire stuck across. Well, most of our Jeeps or things had angle iron cutters on welded to the front of the Jeep, so they'd catch the wire and cut it. Otherwise, it'd take your head off. And but that didn't last very long. They finally got the people, the older people finally started demanding that
The behavior.
yeah. So
Now, let me ask you this for a second. How far away were the Russians from you folks?
the only time that I personally had trouble, well, twice, we were going, the mess sergeant, myself, we had we won a 3-day pass for, they give you a Jeep with a trailer with gas, and you could go any place you wanted in the American zone. So he had met some people in, when he came up through Austria, he had met some people there. We were down in Augsburg, Germany at that time, and we were going to into Austria at that time, and he didn't realize that it was the Russian zone of Austria that these people lived in, because at the time he came through, it was still wartime, and it wasn't divided up into Russian, American, English, and French.
Right.
So we got chased out of Austria by the Russians. But then also when we were in Bootingen, we went up to Kassel, Germany, which was about, maybe 40, 50 kilometers from our headquarters, was north of where we were. We were in Bootingen, we were just outside of Frankfurt, and this was maybe 30 kilometers above Frankfurt, north of Frankfurt.
So you had liberty or bleed in those various towns you've already mentioned.
Well, and some of them, the one when we went up to Kassel was because they had a DP camp up there, a displaced person camp up there, and the Russians were coming in saying that the people in this particular one were white Russians from the steppes in Russia, which includes Georgia and those other countries now. And they were trying to get these people to go back, saying that they were Russians and they should be back in Russian territory and all this crap. And when we got there, we had interpreters, and they asked the people, and they said, no, we don't want to go back there, because they're just looking for people to put in work camps to help build Russia back up again. That's all we wanted. So that's the other time we had some trouble with them, and they were pretty, they didn't have any, they weren't allowed to carry any weapons in with them or anything. But when we went up there, we took some M8s with 20 millimeter cannons on them, and they had a 30 caliber machine gun on top. And we were at one gate guarding it there, and the Russian soldiers came out, and they were standing up on a knoll, and they kept on yakking and laughing and pointing at us and stuff. And one of the fellas on the machine gun and the M8 was a Russian, from his parents, but they lived in the States, and he could understand Russian. And he said to the lieutenant that was with us, he said they're making fun of us, little sissy boys. I wonder if their mamas know where they are, all this stuff, And he was listening to it, and so he told the lieutenant. And so the lieutenant says, well, I'll tell you what, he said, why don't you show what the little sissy boys can do? And he said to the lieutenant, you mean it? He said, yeah. He said, just spray the bottom of the hill there where they're standing. So he took the .30 caliber and he just blasted across it. Those guys disappeared. We didn't see them again. So it was, that was the only thing they understood anyway, is force. And they're still the same way. But there were other times when different outfits that were on the border patrols and that got shot at by the Russians. And I never had that happen, but I know other constabulary units were shot at. But you only had so many men on these border patrols, but as soon as you had any trouble, you had a backup. There was usually a platoon ready to come in and help you.
You had quite a few interesting experiences on that assignment.
Oh yeah, it was very interesting. It was we were out at an outpost in Hanau, Germany. It was I was a sergeant, and we used to do 24 hours on, 24 hours off, desk sergeant duty. And you sent your patrols out. And every once in a while, I'd go out on a patrol with them, just make sure that everything was going right. There was a staff sergeant. He was in charge, and I was a buck sergeant. And then we had like T5 corporals, radio men. We had a couple of them, and then we had T5 Jeep drivers or truck drivers. There was about, usually about a squad, anywhere from 7 to 10 men, including no officers, all non-coms were in charge of the outpost. That was when we were in Booting, and Hanau was about maybe 30, 40 kilometers from headquarters. We used to go down every morning with 5 o'clock, the guys leave with all reports and stuff, and go down and pick up mail and bring it back up. And but in Hanau, that city was two things. It made ball bearings, and it made chemicals. And they flattened it. I had too bad I don't have it now. I had a picture of one of the tallest buildings that was left. All you can see is stairs going up and then like a platform, and there was a John sitting up there. There was nothing else left. And it was the funniest thing to see the toilet sitting up on this platform. Funny to me, wasn't too funny to the people that lived here. But
so where do we go from there?
Pardon?
Where do we go next?
From there, we went, let's see, that was in Hanau. I think it was, we were in Bootsbach, I think. No, Bootsbach, I went, they shipped me up to Bootsbach to train. They had a bunch of recruits come in, and they said they had never even fired a rifle. They'd been in the Army for 8 weeks, and they were overseas. And so I gave them sidearms 45 training and Thompson submachine gun training. And I did that for about 3 weeks. Then I was shipped back into doing constabulary work again. And I'm trying to think of the name of the town where we were. It was just a little small place. And again, it was just a squad. And we'd come back in from patrol, and it was in the evening. We decided we were going to clean our weapons. We hadn't fired them or anything, but we when we still had live ammunition. And it was a round table, and we're all standing around the round table, and there was a fellow next to me, then there was a German cop who was also our interpreter. And he was there, and there was 4 or 5 of us around the table. And this other fellow was beside me, was sitting in a chair, and we were all starting to take our 45s apart to clean them and stuff, and we already started, and he said, well, I think I'll do mine. He got up, and he cleared his, he cleared the magazine out of his 45, but he didn't clear the thing, and he's standing there, and he pulls the trigger on the 45, and he shot himself right through. It went through just under his chin bone here, broke this bone on his chin, went across through the roof of his mouth, hit his cheekbone over here, and he laid the pistol down. I looked at him, when I fired, and he just went just as white as your shirt. And he said, sorry, fellas, and he laid his pistol down, and he just fell down, and I turned him over. He was on his back, and I turned him over on his face, because he was spitting blood and stuff out. I didn't want him to choke, and I'm searching all over his head to see where the bullet come out. I couldn't find it. The German cop ran and got a German doctor for us, because we were, when we were 40 kilometers from base then, and the guys got on the radio and called in for an ambulance, and the German cop came within 5 minutes with the German doctor, and he said, the bullet didn't come out, it's in his head someplace. What had happened, it had gone, I saw him about 3 months later, and his jaw was all wired together, and the bullet had gone across and lodged between his skin and his temple. He was really a lucky fellow. But if he had...
What caliber?
45. And if he'd had it down just a little bit later, it would have went through my head. You just never know. Guys aren't really thinking when they do things.
Right.
Yeah, we were allowed to... They finally took the fraternization thing off, but some officers didn't like it. We ended up with one just before we came home who didn't like it because we went out with German girls and went dancing and stuff like this. And he called Sergeant Daniels and myself and read us the riot act. And Daniels got a little hot under the collar and told him, well, you don't have to worry, you got your wife over here. Because officers at that time were allowed to have their wives over. It was just after that the enlisted men were allowed to have them over too. But that ended up with, when we got back to the States.
And how did you get back to the States?
Well, we went... we went from, that was in Bodingen, and then we went to Augsburg, Germany. It was in southern Germany, and we did the same thing. We did patrols and stuff down there, but then they started training, because we were having a little trouble with the Russians at that time. That's when they started their Cold War, early antics of it, and they started giving us training on weaponry and everything again, refreshing us and whatnot. And then we went on a 100-mile march, and we went and we bivouacked and everything, but 5 days. We went 25 miles out and 25 miles back in 5 days, or not, 50 miles out and 50 miles back in 5 days. And then when we got to show how good we were and everything, when we got within a kilometer of our post in Augsburg, we double timed the last kilometer into the fort or into the barracks. But that was a show of force, supposedly, to see that. It was interesting most of the time. We weren't, by then the German police had taken over a lot of the stuff by that time. We were just there to oversee everything.
Now, when you came back, did the whole outfit come back?
No. If you had enough time. And in between, when was it? 1946. I think it was February. No. I'm trying to think. I signed up for another year. I signed up in the regular army for a year, and not the solicited army. I was and that was something I got discharged, and
when
the colonel wasn't.
You mentioned discharge. What date was that?
Pardon?
The approximate date of discharge.
Oh. Let me see if I have it written down here.
Well, we get back to it later.
I can't remember now. I think it was February of '47. I signed up for another year.
And where were you then?
In Augsburg. No, in Bootingen. We were still in Bootingen. We hadn't gone down.
You signed up there?
Yeah. And, well, I didn't get, the colonel was away, and the adjutant was away at the time. Well, he wasn't on post anyway. And they didn't have anybody to swear me back in. So this went on for about 6 weeks almost. And I got in a little trouble with this captain. We came in, like I said, we were on outpost. Well, one of the fellows and I used to like to hunt, and we'd get in the Jeep when they were going in and wanting to take the stuff in. We'd go with the messenger, and we'd have him take us over to do a little hunting on the way. We were hunting rabbits. They have, like our jackrabbits, they're big. And we had in the outpost, we had a German chef, and he made meals that were out of this world for us. And we shot a couple of rabbits on the way, and on the way back out to the main road, the damn Jeep broke down. So we had to push it about a half a kilometer out to the main road, and we got this other outfit that towed us with a 6x. They towed us back into headquarters and took it in the carburetor. Something went wrong with the carburetor. So this captain always had an inkling that we were doing something. So he decided that me and the other fellow were going to get charged with misappropriation of a government vehicle. So he brought up the charges and everything. We got up into the headquarters building, and he was talking to the colonel and everything. And so when he got all finished and everything, and he started asking the other fellow and myself, I said, well, you know, I said, he wants to bring up all these charges and everything, sir. I said, but, you know, actually, I'm not in the Army. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, I signed up for another year, I think it was in February. I said, and nobody was here to swear me back in. And so this captain, the troop captain, he says, there's another thing. He's been accepting government pay and he doesn't even belong in the Army. And the colonel looked at him and he said, will you shut up for a minute? He said, you're trying to get him on misappropriation of government vehicle. I said, he said, he's not even in the service anymore. And I said, now you're trying to charge him for getting paid. So anyway, he just threw the case out. But we were lucky because he'd never gone out to the Jeep himself and looked in, in the Jeeps they have where you keep the chains and all this stuff like that. We had a couple of rabbits inside there. But we got back and took the rabbits back up and we had a nice meal out of them. But, you had to do what you had to do.
You sure did.
Yeah. It was...
Well, so when did you get back to the States now?
Well, then we left. We were in Augsburg. We were doing patrols down there. One of our patrols just before we left, they came across this real wide road, and it seemed to go down. They followed it down for, I don't know, a couple of kilometers now, and it ended at the end of a big mountain. They couldn't figure out, here's this beautiful, almost like the Audubon, all the way down to this mountain. Well, come to find out, the parts for Messerschmitt went in one area, and the mountain opened up, and the plane came out this area, and that was actually a takeoff strip for the Messerschmitts when they were finished building them. It was one of our outfits that found it. So they were pretty slick.
I wish you had a photograph of that.
Yeah, they were pretty slick. But then, in December of '47, I started on my way home, and they put us on a train in Augsburg, and we went up to Bremerhaven, Germany.
Was that a one-day trip or longer?
I think it was about a full day. It was one troop train that went.
Don't tell me it was a cattle car this time.
No. It was a regular train, regular German train. But it carried mostly all military people, and it went right up to the port of Bremerhaven. And we spent Christmas Eve in Bremerhaven. We went to a local cathedral there. It was beautiful. They had all the Christmas carols sung all in German and everything, but you couldn't understand it. It was a Catholic cathedral. It was really nice. I went to one other one in Eschlingen, Germany. There, I went for an Easter service. Went to a I don't know, castle, I guess it was, but they had a little church inside the thing. It was fantastic. They had no loudspeakers or anything else, but it was built in a round.
The acoustics. And
the acoustics were fantastic. You could hear every word the priest was saying, every word the choir was singing. It was fantastic. It was a beautiful place. And well, anyway, when we got up 25th, we had they had us in I don't know what it was, but it was an enormous hall. We just had cots all over the place. The guys were going home, and they served us Christmas dinner there. And then on the 26th, no, the 28th, I guess it was, we started boarding the ship.
Was turkey included at that time?
Yeah, we had turkey.
Good.
Turkey dinner then. Yep. Most of the time when we first went from Berblingen to Boudingen, the German concern, or the barracks where the Germans had their soldiers and that, they had displaced people living in them. So we, for about 4 weeks, we had to live in tents till they got all those people out of there. The UNRWA was running the things then. They ran the displaced people things, and they had to fumigate everything, you know, and clean it all out. Matter of fact, before they let us go in there, they doused us all with DDT to make sure we didn't get any bugs from the place that might not.
Take me back to being on a transporter. What type of ship? Transport?
Yeah.
Bringing you back to.
Yeah, we got on a H.H. Taylor. It was, and that's a funny thing because my hometown, H.H. Taylor was a big lumber company, and this was the name of the ship was H.H. Taylor. It was Kaiser, one of Kaiser built those
Liberty ships.
Those Liberty ships, and you look over the side and there was a big split in the one side of it, but didn't bother. When we went through the English Channel, when we came down out of the North Sea into the English Channel, that was really something because it looked just as peaceful as could be. And then all of a sudden the boat would just go take a nosedive. And you were looking over if you were anywhere near the bow, you'd look and all you could see was water in front of you. And then it'd come up, and the guys who were up in front there would get soaked because it had hit a certain amount of the water coming. And we had been warned by, matter of fact, one of the fellows, when I first started out, there was 3 or 4 of us went down to join the Merchant Marine before we got drafted. And only one fellow was accepted at the time. The rest of us had to have teeth work done and everything. The Merchant Marine wouldn't do it. You had to have it done. This one fellow went into the Merchant Marine, and when we were coming back from overseas, he was one of the crew on the H.H. Taylor. You talk about a small bird. And yeah, so if we wanted something besides GI food, we'd pay him a couple of bucks. And
now, how many days did that trip back take? And
took us 14 days to come back.
And where did you land?
We landed in New York, and then they took us to Kilmer, New Jersey, and I was. We left on the. I think we left on the 30th. No, it was on the 28th we left, and 28th of December '47. We landed in New York. And I was discharged on the 12th of January of '48.
You took the train from there into where? In Milford?
Well, no, we had to go through a debriefing thing and everything, and when we went to, I had to have some teeth work done, and so did this other fellow, and we went up to the dentist, and he said, well, he's out to lunch, you'll have to come back after, he's out to chow, you'll have to come back after chow. So we said, okay, but in the meantime, they'd already handed us our discharge papers. So we come back after chow, and the guy said, you know, what are you doing here? So he said, we were told to come back after chow. The dentist would check us out to see what the, you know, what the Army was going to do for our teeth. And so I said, you got your discharge papers, you're out of here. I said, no, I'm not going anywhere.
Good.
He gets on the phone, calls the MPs. MPs come up, put us in a weapons carry, take us outside the gate and said, don't come back. So then we caught a bus into New York and we took a train home. Then I got into Danbury, that's as far as the train went at that time. And I had still 14 miles to go to get to New Milford. I'll hitchhike, it won't be bad. And I got up there. Nobody would pick a GI up. I walked about 2 miles, and finally this car stopped. And the girl said, on down the window, and she said, "Gee, you look like a Flynn." I said, "Yeah, I'm Gene Flynn." She said, "You're Matt Flynn's brother?" I said, "Yeah." "Why?" She said, "Oh, they're friends of the family." "Come on, I'll give you a ride." So she brought me back to New Milford.
Yeah. All right, what did you do with yourself when you got home?
Started looking for work. There was no work to be found. Like I said, I worked for 50 cents an hour washing dishes in Danbury, hitchhiking back and forth for 1 week in February, and that was...
Did you get to use the GI Bill at all?
Well, after... no, I didn't. I used it for buying a house. But I before that, they had 40 and 8 for... They give you $40 for 8 weeks from the government until you found a job, but it only lasted 8 weeks. So I ended up looking for work. We had a big fire in town. I went to work for the people that were rebuilding the buildings that got burned out. Because I had worked as a butcher in the A&P, and they had to take me back. The A&P had to take me back, but I didn't. I didn't want to go back right away. I was still too antsy. And so I worked for these people for a good 6 months before we got the buildings all back to normal again.
And then you went back?
Then I went back to work for the A&P.
And how long were you with them?
I was with them from, I guess, this end of the summer of '48 until right up until I got married. In the meantime, while I was doing all this, I was going with I had met through telephone calls, and I had met my wife's sister, who came down from Canada to visit relative, and we lived in New Milford, and her aunt lived in not Bridgewater, something like Bridgewater. Anyway, she had a farm over there, and her aunt and her uncle and her came to town one time, and my friend and I saw her. This was before I went in the service, and we thought this pretty good looking blonde looked pretty good, so we followed him around, and finally her uncle realized what was going on, so he put her in a local ice cream parlor there. We went in, introduced ourselves to her, and her name was Eleanor Lane, and so we went out with her my buddy went out with her because he could get his father's car. We didn't have a car. So he used to stop and pick me up, and all three of us would go to the movies or whatever. And because her aunt would have conniption fits if she ever knew it. But anyway, when she was getting ready to go home the day before she left, I said to her, "You got any more at home like you?" And she said, "Yeah, I've got a younger sister. Would you like to write to her or call her?" And I said, "Yeah." So I started, I was 17 at the time, and she was 15. And I called her up after her sister got home to tell her that I was going to call. I called her up, and we started writing to one another, and she wrote to me all the time I was in the service overseas. And we finally got together. She just turned 1949, I think she just turned 20. And I went up to Canada We did my would-be brother-in-law and I were buddies. Tommy Wooden and I were buddies, so we decided we'd drive up to Toronto and see her. And we left on a Saturday night. We drove all night long, and part of right up till about 10 o'clock Sunday morning we got to where she lived, and all I knew was she lived at 1600 Boulevard. Well, we get to 1600 Boulevard in Toronto out in the Kingsway, and it's an apartment building. So we're sitting in the car, and I'm saying, well, I don't know what apartment she's in. So pretty soon this good-looking guy comes walking out towards the car, and I said to Tommy, I said, gee, I didn't know Marion had a brother. And so he comes up to the car, and he said, Gene? And I said, yeah. He said, oh, I'm Manly Lane. He said, I'm Betsy's father. And I'm thinking, who the hell is Betsy? And he said, oh, you probably know her as Marion, he said. But we call her Betsy. So that's how it started, and we've been together for a little over 60 years now.
Well, in that case, I'd like to thank you. You had a very interesting story. I really enjoyed hearing your story. Thank you, Eugene.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.